Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
Everybody, welcome back to the show. Obviously, you don't know what we're talking about. It's going to be a great surprise. So let's start with what's going on in the world. Well, not the world, but like our world. So next up on the Fish and Game podcast, we'll be getting into the ins and outs of stew. We're going to do another Wild Kitchen segment. We're kind of on the tail end of stew season, I feel like, Adam, but I still think it's a great time to talk about stew. I think anytime is a great time to talk about stew, so that works really well. We're kind of like using this Wild Kitchen series to kind of spread just widely into a lot of different food conversation. I think really to highlight the versatility of wild game, fish, forageables, homegrown stuff, whatever you feel like. That's really vital, I think, as we, push forward the conversation of the use of wild food in that space. So if you have anything you would like to see, if you're like, hey, Justin, I'd really enjoy if you talked about casseroles.
Yeah, I think we're going to dig into that at some point.
Are we? It's very Midwest. I like it.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you like anything you'd like us to cover on the show, just let us know. We'll cover it. News for me, nothing really that new. Driving up to Pennsylvania to pheasant hunt next weekend. Going to do some catfish fishing as well. The sausage book, I'm waiting on the copy of it to arrive so I can proof it. And then it will be for sale after that. Also, too, this Thursday we'll be a week behind. So last Thursday, I would have talked to the future me and told the future me that I was going to post some stuff in the shop for sale. So I'm going to do that in the new shop. So keep an eye out for that. And then I'll also subsequently open up the pig camp in December. So lots of exciting things are going to happen in the week in between us recording and you listening. So be sure to go back in time and click the website and see what's going on. But all right, Adam, what do you got?
Well, I said I was going to do some maple sugar some syrup boiling last week, but the temperatures didn't quite work out, so the sap wasn't running. But this week, the temperatures are all above freezing during the day and below at night, meaning the sap's running like crazy. So this weekend, I'll actually be doing that, which I'm very much looking forward to. It's nothing like watching sap boil for hours while accompanied by a bottle of whiskey and a couple dogs or something. So I think I'll be doing that. Planning lots of traveling for the BHA rendezvous this year for pig camps and stuff like that. And also just got my seeds in for this year for my garden. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to start seeds soon for tomatoes and peppers and stuff. Lots of fun stuff. So always exciting to start planting my garden as things start melting and everything here. So that's about it for me.
Yeah, I forgot to say that. I got invited to cook the BHA Field to Table dinner again. Not again. I just showed up last year and helped other people cook, but I got invited formally to be a cook again. So I guess I'm back on the good side of things. But excited for that. That'll be fun. Missoula, Montana, second week in June? Yeah.
Yeah, 13th, 14th, 15th.
Are you going, Nicole?
If I can, I always go. Yeah, I've been going since 2015. Yeah. So after the Montana rendezvous, but yeah.
Yep.
I worked for BHA, so I have been a long time part of it.
Did we hang out there when did I come first year? 2021? Did you go?
I might have missed. There were a couple that I missed. I couldn't tell you which ones they were off the top of my head.
They're all starting to run together.
I know. I hate to say this, but like most guys in our space wear the same outfit, and I can't tell any of you apart. So we might have met. Yeah. I'm just teasing.
I dress different. I dress different, Nicole.
See, I don't stand out with my camel hat and plaid shirt and my beard.
Here's the uniform. The uniform is obviously a hunting or conservation focused hat, a cool t-shirt from one of the big orgs or brands, a rubber wedding ring, jeans, and shoes that cross over from hiking to town. That's it. That's the uniform. And a flannel. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds about right.
I know it. I have one flannel. That's
okay. Well, then I probably I didn't meet you because I would have remembered.
Okay.
I'm just teasing you.
On The Simpsons when Bart opens his closet and it's the same outfit the whole way across. That's kind of my closet.
Yeah,
it's all just plaid.
I'm not judging. I'm just opining, I guess.
I'm gonna buy like a flannel suit.
That'd be nice.
I was actually thinking. I was like, because we've been talking a lot about like the furs and stuff. I was like, ooh, I could wear fur, and I was like, no, it's gonna be June. Don't do that.
But it can be really cold here. I mean, Montana.
That's true.
Montana is sort of she's a fickle beast in June. You can have snow, or you can have 80 degrees. So I would say bring the fur as a backup because it will still be cold at night. Then I mean, I've had snow in the high country every month of the year before. So I mean, yeah, you can get snow in August if you're in the right or wrong spot, depending on what you're doing.
Oh wow,
that's fair. I like the warmer climates, but let me introduce you so everybody knows who's talking. Today's guest is an award-winning outdoor writer whose work has graced the pages and influenced the behind-the-scenes success of notable organizations like Meat Eater, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and Gear Junkie. She's since branded out into freelance outdoor writing, as well as launching The Western, a Substack co-op rebelling against the constant monetization of writing for the Google search bar. Nicole Qualtieri, welcome to the Wild Fish Gate podcast.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So great to have you. I have to say, so I have been following your guys' work, or your ladies' work, gals' work at the
We're
Western.
We're guys too. You can just call us guys.
Started.
I see guys as like an inclusive word. Like, yeah.
Okay.
It makes me feel like I'm more a part of this camp. Do you know what I mean? Like, just
makes sense.
I also say
use guys.
I say y'all a lot.
Y'all is a
too,
good one.
So yeah,
use
guys, y'all. I'm from the South.
Yeah.
Y'all. I've been following y'all, your work, and I really like it a lot. I think it's like it's true, it's needed. I think it's great, and it's super punk rock, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's funny because I get that gets attributed to me so much, and I've never like been like a punk rock musician, like music lover. Like I've always loved like I'm more of like hip hop and country, but I definitely have kind of a punk rock aesthetic when it comes to like business or the way that I think about things. And I think that has stretched, I've been in the hunting media world since 2014 when I first got the job working on Meat Eater, which then was under ZPZ Productions, which was Anthony Bourdain's, realm. So I was the first Montana hire for that company. And it was such a learning experience. And that place it was like a punk rock production company in many ways, right? Like they transformed the way we think about food, and they transformed, the way that I thought about food as a kid growing up in the Midwest. I think Bourdain did more for me than any series of restaurants could have ever done, right? And helping you start to see the world differently, So yeah, I can. I told you that I like rabbit holes, so you guys can always stop me. But I will say that I like having that sort of a punk rock feel about things. I think that it just always feels a little bit more fresh. It's just fun.
Yeah. What I think too, fresh, and then it doesn't fall into like the normal form of things. And I think, I'm going to say this too, and I think both country and hip hop fit that as well.
Yeah.
If you step out of the seams of mainstream country, of like pop country,
sure.
And, both of those definitely historically have, lived in that space as well. So I think you're there.
Okay,
You're
I'll
there.
take it.
You're there for sure.
Rebels.
All right. Well, we've teased everyone about your background a bit. Could you expand on your background?
Sure.
How did you get into hunting, fishing, the outdoors, wild food, all of it? Let's just dive deep.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the short and long. If we're focusing on hunting, I think that's probably a good way to tame it all down. Focusing on hunting, I spent the first 16 years of my life in Ohio. So I was adjacent to a lot of whitetail hunters, but I didn't grow up hunting myself. And I finished high school in Colorado, ended up going to Colorado State University, graduated from CSU. I went into corporate America. So I was in corporate America all through my 20s doing sales, working in both tech startups and educational publishing. That was kind of the world that I was in. I was thinking I was on VP track corporate America world. And funny enough, I ended up getting a job offer. And I mean, we're skipping over basically 30 years of my life, but here's that. I'll tell you this in a nutshell, and it's going to sound crazy, but I grew up in a cult until I was 8 years old. So grew up on an actual cult, moved to Columbus, Ohio, had a more normal childhood for the rest of that. And then everything kind of gets more normal through college. But I'm working on a memoir right now about kind of the transition and I got to live on a giant farm. And it was absolutely a very cool childhood in many ways because we grew a lot of our own food and we raised a lot of our own meat. And we had, sheep and dairy cows and horses. And so my love for the landscape was really born out of that time living in that community. And yeah, that it's a whole other bizarre thing, but I think the best parts of it are that I was very feral and I, was fishing for bluegills from the time I was 5 on. That was sort of when you were allowed to be close to the water. And so grew up kind of fishing for fun and, gigging frogs and doing all of those things. And my mom wasn't cooking any of it. You know what I mean? We were throwing it back in the water or, just being kids. But I had a lot of access to the wildness of that particular landscape, if that makes sense. There was over 300 acres to play on. So with a herd of just rowdy, feral, dirty children, I'm dirty in the sense that we were playing in the mud. But that sort of, I guess, need for freedom has played out over the course of my life. And when I was in corporate America, I got a job offer to go to either Seattle or Montana. And I was actually going to pick Seattle. And my best friend called me and she was like, you love the outdoors. You love being in wild places. You should go to Montana. And she kind of talked me out of Seattle. And so I ended up moving to Montana, which is where my mom is from. I lasted 6 months in that job. It was a really tough job. I was working 80 to 100 hour weeks. And then I was traveling. I was home 4 days a month. And I was 28, and so then I'd get home and I had friends in Bozeman and they were all hiking and fishing and skiing and working part-time as a brewer and doing back in 2012, Bozeman was still really affordable. My first apartment in Bozeman was $475 a month and it was a 1-bedroom really close to downtown. And then so it was super affordable and it was very art centric and outdoor centric. And I was I'm 28, I'm single. Why am I giving my life away in exchange for money? And I mean, it was good. It was a decent amount of money, but it wasn't worth it. So I quit that job and I kind of sat down and I was like, well, what would I want to do? And my favorite writer at the time, I loved Tom McGuane. I read Tom McGuane's essay, Heart of the Game, which I talk about a lot, highly recommend. But Pam Houston is a writer who wrote about adventure outside. And so I was like, well, I think I want to become an outdoor writer. And so I made this decision in 2013. And I told you this is a long-winded story, but I'm getting there. I promise. So
lay it on us.
No, we're here. This is your time.
All right. So, so in 2013, I started really I quit my job. I worked as a bartender at a place called Montana Ale Works for a while. Then I sewed backpacks at Mystery Ranch. That was like my first job in the outdoor industry. And Mystery Ranch backpacks, you guys probably have heard of Mystery Ranch before. But great packs. I'm a terrible sewer. I'm sorry for anyone who had to wear a pack that I made. But it passed quality check. So obviously I was like working on backpacks and hiking a ton, and I had started camping by myself. So I like drove up to Glacier and did a camping trip by myself, ran into a bunch of bears, had just like a crazy time. And so I decided that the next summer I was going to do a backpacking trip, like, and just spend my whole summer backpacking. So I essentially saved money. I had a little bit of severance, and I like spent my whole 2014 summer backpacking all over the Continental Divide by myself. And I did over 150 miles on the Continental Divide Trail, in addition to like a bunch of day trips and like shorter trips around Wyoming and Montana. And I just had these amazing experiences out there by myself. I didn't have a dog at that time. So it was literally just me and the land. And I would go 4 days without talking to another person like some of those stretches. And I had a really incredible experience where I was sitting on the edge of this field and eating my dinner, and like out in front of me pops like a big cow elk, and then another elk comes out, and this is like 30 yards away. And I sat in the spot and I froze. Like I kind of was sitting with my food and just didn't move. And I kind of just stayed still in the landscape, and over 200 elk came out of the trees around me. And I was able to like make it back to my tent without spooking any of the elk. And it was such a profound experience. And I was sitting in my tent that night, and it was like beautiful. And I had the windows open so I could like see the silhouettes of the elk grazing and hear them grazing around my tent. And I'm a horsewoman, so like that sound is like very like close to my heart, just like that sound of animals eating. And then like coyotes were like singing on the edge of this big valley, and you know there were owls going off, and it was just like this. It was like just one of those life-changing moments. And I like had 10 miles to hike the next day, and you know I'm packing all my own stuff, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, who gets to do this? You know what I mean? Like, who gets to spend time with elk? And I was like, hunters get to. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to become a hunter. And so I had this sort of moment that was, you know, so that's like really different. I think that's how a lot of people come to hunting.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a very pristine moment that's unique, and it's like, you know what, I'm gonna hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
Fair.
So
I like it.
It was really incredible. I mean, the elk were vocalizing all night and kind of like false bugle it. Like there were young bulls false bugling and playing, and like just it was very cool. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And so I went back into Bozeman thinking that I was going to be looking for a job that would at least allow me to become closer to the outdoors. And by no means did I think I was going to get a job in hunting media, but there was a job on Craigslist for a social media community coordinator from ZPZ Productions for a hunting show called Meat Eater. And I had never heard of Meat Eater before. I looked up ZPZ and I thought it was a scam. So I sent them an email and I was like, is this a real job? Like, why are you guys hiring here? What are you doing? And they were like, no, yeah, it's real. And so I was like, God, do I really want to work on a hunting show? Because like what I thought of a hunting show was like Outdoor Channel, like big white. And I'm not like necessarily crapping on that, but like it was not my thing. Do you know what I mean? Like sort of like the big bucks and like turning their heads around and like all that stuff.
There's
a lot of blood, whatever.
There's
you guys know
there's something to be said about the vintage hunting shows. I guess they're not vintage. There's still shows like that, but yeah.
It's just a different feel. And so I got Steve's book from the library and read it, and I was like, yeah, like I will work on the show. And then so I ended up getting the job. And that I started December 1st, 2014. So here we are 10 years later. And I worked there for 2.5 years. I worked at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers for about 1.5 years, 2 years. I was the hunt and fish editor at Gear Junkie for between 4 and 5 years. And then I've been freelancing and doing a bunch of stuff ever since then. And so really I've been writing or editing full time since 2018. So, but I've always been in the communicating space, if that makes sense. So I worked in as like social media, or like I did all of Meat Eater social media for 2.5 years and BHA social media. And, you get amply burnt out on that space. But I would say that like I, especially working with Steven at ZBZ, it was like getting a grad school education and like the best of hunting communication at that time. So it was really incredible, and they did take a chance on me. I know they could have hired hunters into that position, and they chose someone who was just really enthusiastic and a decent writer. So I'm still grateful that like I had that opportunity. But it's still wild to think that like how the cosmos aligned in those moments. But yeah, I'll leave it. I'm going off. But so this is my 10th season, which is really exciting. That's probably the most exciting thing about this year for me, is that like last year marked a decade in hunting media. But I had done my hunter's education with 2 other gals that worked at Meat Eater then. And yes, this is my 10th year hunting. So I have high expectations that will most likely get dashed, but that's just what hunting does to you.
I was thinking back. So where did sort of the wild food or the food part come in? Did always enjoyed food, or has it been?
Yeah, that's a really good
part
question.
of your outdoor world?
I have like a lot of Italian and French heritage. So like I was born into a family of good cooks. You know what I mean? So I would say that I was really born with a love for food and a love for cooking and the artistry of it. I think as I got older, like I was more interested in different techniques and books. And obviously I loved Anthony Bourdain. And, I think getting interested in international cuisine was hard when you're from the Midwest initially. Like trying sushi was a big deal, right? Like I love sushi now, but I still remember my younger sister took me out for my first like sushi roll when I was 16. She was like, we're going to the sushi place. And that was a big step. But my mom is a great cook. So like that has always been there. We, ate a lot of things from scratch, and but nothing that I would think is like over the top in any way, just sort of like classic family food or like our family Italian recipes. But as I got like, or even just started thinking about hunting, I was exposed to wild meat really over the course of my life, because growing up in Ohio, a lot of my friends' dads were hunters. Like a lot of my best guy friends were hunters. I actually was thinking about getting my hunter's education license because I had a really close group of friends that were boys in high school, and they wanted me to come hunting with them, just to like come to the camp with their families. So it was more of like the idea of doing it as part of a community, not I was like, I don't think I'll kill a deer, but I'll go to do my hunter's education so I can go come with you guys and hang out with your families. But we ended up moving before that happened. So it is sort of interesting that I might have still ended up on that path. You know what I mean? But if I had stayed in Ohio, but it just ended up being a longer path. But I grew up eating venison and, some foraged mushrooms, and gardens were a big part of like Ohio is a great place to grow a garden, a lot easier than Montana. But as far as like the wild game aspect of it, I mean, I think working at Meat Eater was like I said, it was like a grad school education, and I guess not only communication, but eating wild food. And so, I got to try so many things there, and it was I talk about the sharing economy of hunters in that piece that I wrote. But I have been really blessed to be in a sharing economy of hunters really from the beginning of my hunting media career, and just building friendships with hunters here, at least here in Montana. But I'd certainly tried a lot of wild food growing up, so I didn't have like an averse reaction to the idea of eating wild game, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes total sense. And you spell out some experiences too in the article. And so I'll tell everybody too, the article we're referencing is The Incredible Edible Animal Hierarchy. Subtitle, Hunting Changed the Gastronomical Game, literally and metaphorically for you.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive in more into that, but that's kind of like what sparked this whole conversation. I think from the beginning, and we'll dive into it here in just a little bit. But first, I have to ask you one really serious, not so serious question that we ask everybody.
Yeah, shoot.
What's in your fridge or freezer or pantry that you're really excited about cooking?
Oh man. I had a really sad season last fall and didn't end up filling my freezer, but I have a bunch of elk shanks that one of my friend gave me on the bone, and that's one of my favorite things to cook. I also picked up some marrow butter from a local butcher that I've been saving for a special occasion. So I make my own sourdough. So maybe the next time I have someone over, I'll bust out some sourdough, the marrow butter, and the elk shanks. But yeah, I love cooking shanks. It's they are definitely a part of the animal that I think doesn't get, or that gets short shrift. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a braised girl. I probably get more excited about my braises than my steaks. You know,
you fit in well. You found the right crowd. We have a shirt. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and you may have seen it. We have a shirt that says "Shanks and Praises."
No, I need that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'll send you one. It's awesome. It's got like a cross-cut shank in the middle too, and like lightning bolts, and it says "Shanks and Praises."
My friend Sam Lundgren, who you guys might know his name, he held an event called Shanksgiving. Like, everybody cooked different shanks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we dive into sort of the article a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more about the Western? About how it came to be and like the goal, the mission beyond what I spouted out earlier.
Yeah, thank you for talking about it. So the Western is a labor of love and a labor of accident, I guess. But I had written a piece initially for Outside Magazine, and it was called, initially the working title was "Killing Animals Helped Me Make Peace with Death." And that piece was about, I lost my father to cancer when I was 15. And so it was like a very pivotal moment to lose my dad. And I had a lot of like anxiety about, you know, like, I think especially when you're at that age, you're sort of in this magical place between childhood and adulthood. And so there was always this sort of like mysticism around losing my dad at that time. And I had a big imagination about a lot of things, but it really opened up, I guess, my heart and my mind to what it means to be mortal. And I really had a lot of anxiety about it for a long time, and battled just depression and just like a lot of different things that I think would be normal in the grief process when you lose someone who I was very, very close to my dad. So really through hunting, I was able to touch death in a new way and like see that I could also get nourishment from it, and that I could get adventure alongside it, and that like I could take the life of an animal seriously while also finding joy in filling a tag. And I thought that like there was so much like dissonance in that with like how we live our lives culturally these days. And I was really, really proud of that piece. And when I gave it, so Outside bought it based on the title. And then when I sent them the piece, they said they didn't want it anymore. And I was just beside myself. So I had owned the Western domain for like 2 years at that point, and I'd been sort of sitting on it. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And so I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to publish it myself on Substack and see what happens. And I did that almost a year ago today. So I believe it was like March 7th that I did it. So we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary technically as a brand, but
yay,
thank you.
I read the article.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I read it when it came out. Yeah, no, it was good.
Thank you. Yeah. It went like a little bit viral in our community, and I ended up getting a bunch of subscribers off of it, and I ended up making more money off of it through Substack than I would have from outside. So it was sort of this, it was kind of a like watershed moment for me where I was like, you know, I've built a lot of brands for other people. You know, I really helped build Meat Eater's social network. I really helped build BHA's social network. I did it at Gear Junkie. Like really, I was the first long-term hunt and fish editor there, and helped put our feet on the ground. And then I handed the reins over to Rochelle Schrute, who is one of my best friends in the industry, and she's taken it to new levels. So I think it is really cool to have built all of those things. But I kind of, I also turned 40 last year. So I was like kind of looking at this landscape and I was like, all right, like it's time just to do this for yourself. And, but I didn't want to do it alone. And so I'd had a lot of writers reach out to me, about potentially writing for me. And I was like, well, I reached out to a kind of select few of them. I was like, would you want to work on this as like a collaborative project? And the two people that have stuck with it are Katie Hill. And Katie Hill is a journalist who's written for Meat Eater, Outdoor Life. She's also an award-winning journalist, wrote a lot about CWD, and just super sharp, a really great storyteller, really more on the journalism side than I would say that I am. Like, I really like sort of the narrative side of things. And then Kestrel Keller, who has been a long time hunting partner of mine. And Kestrel is a really accomplished science journalist, has written for Nat Geo and Wired, and also has a master's degree in ecology, I believe, but just like incredibly smart and well educated on landscape and like this place that we're in. An incredible hunter, like has killed big game like on their own in the backcountry with a bow. You know what I mean? Like just a total badass. So at this point, what we've been doing is we do 2 long reads a month on Substack. So basically we're trying to put more narrative long read stories into the world about hunting, and building, like you said in the beginning, something that's a little punk rock, that's going against like sort of, the how-to SEO world that, I lived in really 24/7 for a very long time, and allows us to write stories that I think have a lot of soul, or maybe they aren't the type of like big news story that's going to get a ton of hits, but like the people that read it are going to be people that, really give a crap about public lands and hunting and fishing or skiing and running. Like, we don't want to be pigeonholed. We want to serve the space between the sporting world and the outdoor recreational world, because we all think that there's a lot of crossover there. And we think that the public deserves to read stories about hunting that are meant to be read by everyone. I think that one of the best things we can do as hunters is create more advocates. And I think about that a lot. I've thought about that a lot in my work because, that's really where I come from. I come from a non-hunting background, and, now I'm a full bore, I have a gun dog. I have a mule and a donkey that I pack with. I'm a bow hunter. I'm a rifle hunter. I'm a bird hunter. I fly fish. I conventionally fish. So like, I think that we almost put too much emphasis on like the expert and not enough on just like the generalist. And I think that like you can be a generalist in this world and have a lot of fun. But I don't know. That's the Western. So what we're doing now is like we're working on our first paper. So we're doing an outdoor community paper that's going to be published 4 times a year. And the first one we're on deadline for April 20th, and then it's being printed. Or I'm sorry, deadline is March 20th. It's being printed and shipped April 1st. So yeah, I can give a little bit at the end about how people can subscribe or grab it, but
okay,
yeah, for
it's
sure.
so long-winded.
No, yeah, that's great.
No, I love your comment about the generalist and connecting with people in a different way in the long form and bringing back certain ways of doing things, because it's just also exhausting,
isn't it? Just
seeing like these experts and the SEO and the short kind of things. It can be exhausting. When I was reading one of your articles recently, I was kind of perched with my laptop on something very uncomfortably, and a thing that you can often read anything that you're looking at online in like 2 minutes. And then my back started hurting, and I kept scrolling, and then my back really started. I'm like, what am I doing? I just sat back, relaxed, sat into the couch, and actually stopped and read the whole thing. And it was like really refreshing, actually, to read something long form and something with soul, like you said. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for bringing that back. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I still like writing those short SEO pieces. I think they can be really helpful, and I mean, that's what I have over 400 of them at Gear Junkie, and I burned myself out on that. And like the dream is always to write features, I think, for anyone who loves to write and or write books, right? So you guys are both familiar with that world. I would say that it's also just really difficult to get a feature assignment. There are some people that have been in a feature assignment position in the hunting and outdoor space for 25 years, and they're not letting it go. Like they're still traveling to Alaska and doing all the things, which is very cool. But like the money isn't there for people to feature write. And so I was like, well, I want to write features.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to just like, write about the 5 best bows this season. I really don't. Like, I want to go on an adventure and tell you like how it changed me and tell you like what the history of that landscape is and inspire you to want to go there. Like that to me is like soul writing. And so like when we limit that to, a few certain groups of people, or we're cutting back on that because it's not making us enough money, we're also like shortchanging like the spirit of storytelling, which is as ancient as the spirit of hunting. And so like they're so interconnected, right? And you guys have been in the storytelling space of food for a really long time. Like there's a sense of we can really easily get burnt out in these spaces and it can feel like too much. But I think when that starts to happen, we have to like just take ourselves back to the soul of what we're doing. And the soul of what we're doing is like, how is this changing me? How does this experience change me? What can it offer my community? And like, how do we connect over these tensions, these difficult things, rather than get split apart by them? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to get split apart by the crappy context of one social media post, when like in reality, that social media post could have been 2,000 words that change hearts and minds. So like, we just do ourselves an injustice when we walk away from long form. And I don't believe that our attention spans are so short that it doesn't matter. I think for the things that matter, our attention spans are as long as the thing is interesting and matters to our ethics and our values and our sense of fun and tension.
You don't know how like to the bone, to the heart, you're like those words are hit. Adam and I have been having these discussions for like 2 months now, and that's like that has prompted a lot of shift in the way that we are operating and the things that we are doing. Both Adam, we've been working together on books and stuff for over the last couple years, but just in recent, like the conversation, I was like, I'm losing the passion that I had, for a lot of wild food because of like the consistency and constant that is demanded on me by like
content,
electronic media. And it's like I've got to crank something. Like what's the thing I'm going to talk about today? Like, and it's just like I like just being in that moment. And I still like too, I'm very much like a Bourdain fan in this, like go to the place, feel the moment, live in it, smell the sight, the taste. And it's like, great, I can write a recipe. And I've written hundreds of recipes for all types of publications across the outdoor space. But like, sometimes I just want to talk about the experience, the food, the like, the why, the how, everything behind it. And not just like, hey, here's 2 paragraphs in a recipe. There's so much more that goes into that. It's funny because when I used to write for Meat Eater, that was the feedback I got initially. It was like, Justin, you got to cut down your intro sections. And I was like, but I have a story to tell about food. I want to tell more. And
just so you know, that wasn't the Meat Eater that I worked for. So that's a very different Meat Eater. But like,
no.
This
was I will say this though. So I have some thanks to give you, because if you were the social media person for Meat Eater in 2014 and 2015, we at Harvesting Nature were sharing content on Instagram and tagging you guys, and you guys were sharing it as well. And that helped grow some of our reach. So that's you.
That's what's up.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
See, so you met me before.
Well, yeah, we just didn't.
Met me.
I know that I've been hearing Harvesting Nature forever. And I love that you said that, because I don't necessarily remember doing that. But I remember you now that you say it, I do. Danielle Pruitt is one of my really good friends, and she came up to me and she's like, you're the reason that I work at Meat Eater. Like, you reposted my recipes. And I reached out to her and she sent us like a recipe when I was running the blog. And that's like really like, I was scanning all of our hashtags. I was like, if there was a beautiful picture, like I was putting it, that was like the days of Instagram where it was like photo heavy, and I am a photo freak.
Yeah.
So like I was like, oh, like this is actually professionally done. This is beautiful. This person's working really hard. This seems like an interesting recipe. So one, thank you for following directions and for helping me, meet my content goals. But no, I mean, that was a really powerful time. Everything that I built there was organic. It was really fun. I mean, to put it in numbers, I got handed an Instagram with 10,000 and walked away and it was at 100,000. I ended up growing the whole platform from like under 200,000 to over 500,000 across Facebook. And I mean, I don't necessarily take credit for that. Like Steve was definitely like a golden goose in that sense, but like it was really fun to be able to share in a really communal way back then when Instagram was a little bit different than it is now. So thank you for participating. That's so cool. What a cool story.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I guess all that to say sort of I agree with you, and that's the shift. And I think a lot of Adam's and my conversation of recent, like I think we're gonna look to put out more books on
tell the story,
whatever the hell we want to write about.
Yeah, and I think that when you're vulnerable and when you get into those places where the stories feel hard, then you're just starting to get it right. You know what I mean? Like you're just starting to get it right.
Yeah.
So like I think that like whenever you feel discomfort around something, like as a writer, that's like what we're meant to explore, So I would say that if it's uncomfortable, then more people are going to connect with it, right? So yeah, that's like where I'm trying to write from. So I'm always happy to be a support for anyone who's like working through a story too. So just like know that I'm always interested in the uncomfortable places. Like eating a wolf taco. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, that's really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would akin that to like the skinning the coyote experience that like Adam and I shared at pig camp one year, and was just like, this is very different as someone who likes dogs.
So good, so good, so good.
Easter deals starting at just $25 are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. And that means tons of fresh reasons to rack.
They've got the best gifts.
Because I always find something amazing.
Save on Easter finds from Kate Spade New York, Calvin Klein, MAC Cosmetics, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. Like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
I do want to shift gears here a bit, and I want to talk about your article.
Okay.
Because there's a couple, there's a ton in there to discuss, and I don't think we're going to hit it all. But
I have time, by the way.
So
if we need to go over a little bit,
okay, cool.
You guys are completely fine.
Okay, great. I kicked my family out. I told them to go to Target
Nice.
and the grocery store and things like that. So I normally do the grocery shopping, but this time I was like, guys, go. I want to have this conversation. Cool. Otherwise, my 5-year-old would have been in here knocking at the door already. Aww. Or looking through the window. But the two terms that really like popped out as you were like going through this, the sarcophagy and zoophagy.
Yeah.
First off, thank you for introducing me to those terms, because now they're like living rent free in my mind. So I guess let's talk about the piece sort of from the beginning of like how you kind of put it together, how it came to be, and then really like how those terms, what they are and how they fit in.
So the piece really came out of this piece that I've been wanting to write for a long time, actually, about like the initial working title of this piece was "Why Don't We Eat Our Horses?" And I will tell you that I say that with 3 equines, like a stone's throw across the window in front of me. So I'm not saying it as like there's sort of a contingency in the US that is like, let's eat the wild mustangs, but like it's sort of grotesque and they're like doing it for shock factor. Like I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it mostly because when large animals like horses die, as opposed to like cattle or hogs or typical animals that we eat, they tend to go into a dump, and they go to the dump where there's a big hole dug and they're thrown in with like all the roadkill. And so like there's sort of like there's this immense waste of nutrients, right, that could be creating more soil and doing good things for various species on the landscapes where they are. But we don't necessarily see horses as something to eat. And that really changed for me when I started hunting big game and learned the gutless method. And I do a lot of big game hunting by myself. So it actually really changed in 2019. I killed a pretty big mule deer buck by myself. Like I couldn't even flip him over to gut him. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm doing the gutless method on this guy, and broke him down. And then like the next day or the day after that, I went out to ride my horse and, got her in from the pasture, and I was like watching her move, and I was like, oh my God, like I know how to take this animal apart now. Like it was like I had seen inside of her, so it was like a very shocking moment because I've been around horses since I was a little girl. So I had never like looked at them as like a body of meat, so it was sort of this wild thing, and it really like stuck in my brain. And so I started doing some research, and I came across this really great piece by this woman named Susanna Forrest, and I believe that it's an academic piece, but I believe it's called Horses Are Indeed Delicious. And so it's basically about like the whole history of like our cultural norms. Well, it is the whole history, but it's like a good Cliff's notes on like the history of horses and why we don't eat them. But and this is going somewhere. It's going towards sarcophagy and zoophagy. That's where I learned those terms, was through her article. But it really began kind of backpedaling into something else, which was working on Meat Eater gave me the opportunity to try like more wild game than I think most people in the world will ever try. Like not many people can say that they've eaten all the different types of wild game that I've had like the pleasure to eat without hunting them, because of that hunting sharing economy, because like we had a communal freezer. So like I begin that piece talking about eating mountain lion and cooking mountain lion for the first time. And I made like a pork chili verde recipe, but essentially substituted the lion in and added a little bit more fat. So it really sort of spun me out thinking about all the different things that I've actually never eaten horse. I would if given the opportunity, but I was almost more amazed by the fact that our food system is so small in what we can eat and what we can try. And yet, like, as hunters, like, our world really begins to shift into this giant, really sort of like tree of edible animals that I wanted to think about that hierarchy as necessarily being almost flattened, but having like all of these different like branches and limbs and places to go down, whether that's the predator route or the cervid route or feral animals, right? Mountain goats, sheep. Like there are so many options out there, and yet like we live in such a limited space when it comes to like industrial food. So it both got broadened in a sense, in that I was thinking about the fact that I've eaten mountain lion and muskox and wolf and sandhill crane and like just all of these things that most people don't even think about eating. I just wanted to put it all in one place and see what came out of it. And I think it's a pretty good examination of what it means to eat outside of the norm. And I would hope that if people read it, they would see it as a series of questions that I don't necessarily have an answer to, but like maybe the answer is just trying something new. Even if it's a piece of beef liver, right? Like even if it's just a different piece of an animal. Like a lot of the meat that we eat is actually informed by cultural taboos, right? So it's interesting how our foodways today leave out so much of the animals that are even on our plate. So I can keep going, but
I was going to say our current foodways is definitely like linear. I would think very flat and horizontal versus I think access is like a person who hunter, angler, forager is like so multidimensional that it's hard to just even wrap my head around it, from the fact that not only do we have access to different types of animals, but within those animals, fish, and other forageable things that have benefits beyond just consumption for nutrients or for energy, I'd say. But also the parts of the animal that you can't get in a store,
right?
Like because of those like taboos. And I think there's some industrial influences on our diet as well that have shaped it in the last 150 years.
Right. Like what's easy, what keeps, what, right. So like, what, is used to feed our pets. That's a huge part of everything too. So yeah, I think that, what you're saying resonates. Having access to a whole animal, like the only way that I was going to get to do that, at least before I lived here on this farm, was through hunting. I had never had a whole animal until I killed my first deer. And that was like, I was so excited. Do you know what I mean? I made bone broth, and like what I made us keep the ribs. Like I wanted the ribs whole with the meat on, and I've gone so down the rabbit hole on learning how to butcher, like making a beautiful French roast. Like really, my grandpa was actually a butcher. So like it makes me feel like I'm closer to my own ancestors. So it's just fun. Like I get more excited about butchering like than anything else. And I love it. I think like there's nothing more beautiful and fun and just curiosity inducing than getting an animal on the ground, walking up and putting your hands on it and beginning the process of it becoming food. Like what an incredible transformation. I mean, I don't know if your life isn't going to be transformed by that. Like, I don't know what could transform a life, because like if being far away from our food, like that's the antidote. You know what I mean? Like even if it's just a bird, like even seeing like what's in, what they've been eating, like it's all just fun. I don't know. I love it.
I don't know. Every aspect of it is, and I think too, like each time I open up an animal or each time I start processing, it's like I learn another step or another thing, or I see something new, or like I've butchered quite a bit, but I'm not at that point yet of like where it's sadly repetitious for me to where I'm just like, all right, I'm doing this. Like each cut in my mind is still methodical. It's still an exploration of the animal itself. And then it's also like me trying to continue to hone my skills. And, now Adam and I and other folks, like we teach people how to butcher, but it's still like, I still don't get the opportunity to break down a whole animal, every day. Like it's still a unique, fun experience to be able to do it a few times each year and then sort of benefit from that. And I think it definitely, what you said resonates with me personally, just to kind of explore that.
I was thinking I just butchered a whole cow 2 days ago, and that was just for like a homestead farm kind of butchered their cow for them, and I've got a couple pigs coming up next, and I do it often enough, but it's an adventure every time. Opens you up to seeing the insides and the outsides of an animal. It brings you so much closer to the animal. It makes you respect the animal. You don't waste as much. It just develops like this sense of weirdly you're in it together, even though you killed it. But that's kind of it is that's a great word, intimacy. And that there's an intimacy between the wolf and the deer and the predator and the prey. And there's there's all these systems that you can just let pass by you with your blinders on your whole life. But the minute you do it the first time, you're like, oh shit, this is different. This is visceral. This is real. And it really makes you stop and think. And where a lot of people I've talked to kind of have this like horror movie version of the butcher in their head. It's some stupid idiot with a cleaver slamming, and I don't know, there's filthy space. It's just this like weird vision people have in their heads. Instead, it's this really exciting and beautiful thing. It's interesting.
I thought it was going to be so much more gory. Do you know what I mean? Like when I remember like taking that first steer apart, and I was I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting like gallons of blood. Do you know what I mean? I was like, it's just going to be blood everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's like not that much blood. Do you know what I mean? It's very like the blood follows its circuit and it stays in its little like, its little arterial road system. And like beyond that, it's like there's obviously you get bloody doing it, but like it's not as much as you think. And the imagination around it is much bigger than like sort of what it ends up becoming like as it's in front of you. There's a part of like that I feel like there's a part of that story that is sort of like not really congruous with the rest of it. And I really wanted it to stand out a little bit. It's where I really talk about killing an animal and like taking a life, and it's in present voice. And I really wanted that to be in there because I didn't want someone who wasn't a hunter to read this and take it as like a piece where I was not deeply involved with what I was talking about, because like a lot of it is actually eating things that other people have killed. I didn't kill a wolf. I didn't kill a mountain lion. I was willing to try them. And I would say that it's like a blessing and an honor to like have had those opportunities, thanks to Steve. That mountain lion was off of Steve Rinala's first mountain lion. And then the wolf was off of a wolf that Randy Newberg had killed. So, I feel like really blessed to be like privy to those moments, and I don't take them lightly, So clearly I wrote a story talking about it, but I also didn't want people to not understand that I too was a hunter and that I was capable of taking a life and putting it on a plate. And so I write a lot kind of in this vignette sort of way. And if you read On Killing Animals, like that first piece that I wrote, the style is sort of similar across incredible edible animal hierarchy in that it's a lot of vignettes that are related to each other. And if you're sort of reading between the lines, you can find the common threads. And I like writing like that. I like writing in a really scenic, visceral way. And I think that I think it's also a little bit easier on our attention spans to read in that sort of scenic way. So, I did think it was really important to talk about killing an animal and getting that onto the page too.
Yeah, I think it sort of hits that note you mentioned earlier about like writing about the outdoor world in a perspective that everybody can read it, just from the fact that not everyone has experienced that. And I think people have experienced that in different ways. And oftentimes, the death and killing isn't talked about.
Yeah.
It's sort of like glossed over a bit purposely, I think, for whatever mixed company or opinions that are out there. But it's still like, at the end of the day, that's the business we're in. There's no way to get that protein to the plate without doing it. But it's much more than just protein to the plate. And that's what comes through in the writing.
I think I've had people push against me because I've called it like the violence of it all into play. And people are like, well, it's not violence because it's not like, it's not, it doesn't have any malice. And I was like, I think it does have an amount of malice. And I think it is certainly violent for the animal that's on the other end of a bullet. And I really, it's mostly come from like older men, to be honest. And I had a really long discussion with a group of guys that were probably all in their like 60s and 70s about it. And, I was like they were just dead set against violence as being part of hunting. And I was like, that is so antithetical because that's what people brace at. That's what the public braces at. So like, if we can be honest about what we're doing and say, yeah, like I intended to kill this animal, like in a society, we call that murder. Like, do you know what I mean? And so like, I think that it's totally I think it's actually within our interests to call the violence to the front of it and then say, but on the other side of it, on the other side of that harm is nourishment. On the other side of that harm is life. So like, there's a very deep connection between the, I guess, premeditated violence that like we choose as hunters, because like the outcome is actually energy, and it is sustenance, and it is nourishment, and it is gratitude. And so like, and that gratitude comes like anytime a piece of meat hits the plate, right? Like it totally reshapes the way that we think about it. And so from my experience, being honest about the violence actually like allows people in a little bit closer. You know, I think people that don't hunt often ask me like, what's it like to kill an animal? And it's like for me, it's like generally, aside from geese, which like I will happily like mow down with a shotgun. I like, you know, like I have a very deep, like I have a very like, well, no, I respect geese too. And I actually really like eating geese, but I just have a longstanding feud with them as a soccer player who had to be in goose poop like my entire childhood. So that's a vendetta. That's a little bit different, but you know, I have a deep appreciation that like not all deaths are clean. You know, like I failed a tag, but I didn't recover a deer this year, and like, and I know that deer died. So, you know, you live with that. You have to live with those mistakes, and you live with those accidents in a way, and you learn from them. So I do think that being honest about like the violence of it and about killing an animal is actually really, really important. And I think that like when we say that it isn't that, then it's very easy for the public to like not take our narratives as seriously, because like I think that almost anyone can see that an animal being shot in any way is actually a form of violence. And I don't see that as a negative thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just part of it.
Mm-hmm. I don't see it as negative to me. And I see that as a more natural path than a lot of where we're at today with the acquisition of food. I think
it's a good lead into sarcophagy and zoophagy.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think so. So, well, yeah, let's do that. Great transition.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Whether it's a movie night or just midday, Skinny Pop is a salty snack that keeps on giving. Made with just 3 simple ingredients for an irresistibly delicious taste and a large serving size that lasts. Deliciously popped, perfectly salted. Skinny Pop, popular for a reason. Shop Skinny Pop now.
I guess we talk about from sarcophagy is what it is of sort of, I don't know, you can probably explain this better than me.
Yeah, I'm happy to explain it. So I mean, yes. People might be familiar with like sarco as like sarcophagus, right? Which is like going back to like the mummies and sort of being hidden in a tomb. And like I should have the etymology of this right in front of me, but I don't. Essentially, sarcophagy is when a piece of sarcophageal meat would be like the meat that we get at the grocery store. It's hamburger that doesn't look like a cow. It's a pork shoulder that has no resemblance to pork. So like whenever we eat meat that's from an animal that doesn't take on any of that animal's characteristics, like I say in my piece, you know, a piece of mountain lion could easily pass for a piece of pork. So you could put that on someone's plate and they would never know that they were eating they would be like, this pork is a little dry. That might be all that they say. I don't know. Have either of you guys had mountain lion?
Yes.
I haven't.
I actually
Yeah, like, would you agree?
Chili Verde just the other day. Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah.
I think any of the, I would say like mountain lion, bobcat is in the same vein, like a sweeter version of wild pork that could also pass for domestic pork, depending on how you cooked it.
Right. Like if someone didn't know and they didn't have context that like mountain lion could possibly be on their plate, like that would be, they'd be like, oh, this pork tastes a little different, whatever. So like that's sarcophagy. I think, you can eat a burger and not know any of the meat that's like in there, right? Like, I've had a burger that was both like mountain goat, mule deer, and with pork fat, right? So like, if you handed that burger to anyone, they probably wouldn't guess what's in it, right? They'd be like, this tastes. It was actually one of the best burgers I've ever had. It was really delicious, but I don't know that I would have ever chosen those three animals as like maybe pork fat. Sorry. Moving my computer around. But the other side, I would say that the other thing with sarcophagy that I think is important to understand is that over the centuries, there has been a lot of meat being masqueraded as something that it isn't. So like even today, we have massive issues with seafood being mislabeled and something being much more expensive than it actually should be. Or that's really, I think, with the way that seafood exists in the international waters, like there's just like a lot of shysterness and weird things that happen. So I would say that all of us have thought we were eating one sort of fish and have eaten another type of fish. Like that's just like a given. So sarcophagy is actually, especially before like the USDA came into the world, like a lot of people were eating horse when they thought that they were eating cow. That was like a very normal thing that happened, not only in Europe, but like in the US as well. So there's just like a lot of under the table meat swapping that happened. And all of that was really due to being, to eating in a way that I would call sarcophagal, if that makes sense. Zoophagy is, on the other hand, it's meat that represents the animal that it came from. So that's if we're getting if we ask for a whole fish at dinner and like that fish comes to the table literally like with its head, its tail, and its fins on, like we know what that fish is and like where it's coming from. It's also like pig roast, like at a lua, like that sort of like where we're seeing the whole hog. If there are any identifying characteristics to the meat that like tie it back to the animal, then we're eating in a more zoophagal way. I would say that there's also an aspect of like what we do as hunters where like we're engaging in zoophagy, even if we're eventually getting to that place of sarcophagy, because like we're actually breaking down the animal, like we're putting the exact animal like on that piece of meat, like to me, like it's a perfect marriage between the two. I certainly like process all of my own animals. I don't hand them off to a processor. And like, and I just never have. Maybe I will at some point because I will need to, but like at this point, like that's not really on the menu for me. But I do think that hunting gets us a lot closer to that zoophagy, even if we're eating meat in a final form that is more like in the sarcophagy realm. I guess that's my explanation.
And I agree with you on that. And I think you can, mainly because there is some resemblance of its original form, right? You can trace the dots back, right? Like,
yeah,
I think about it from your example of like ground meat, ground burger, or ground beef, right? So ground beef, let's start there. So it's probably got a combination of pork fat or beef fat or some sort of fat in there. Plus there's some sort of like liquids going on in there. And then there's also, well, okay, it came from a steer. Well, what kind of steer was it?
Right.
I think in hunting you can break that down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it Angus? Yeah. Is it Hereford? Is it Red Angus? Is it Black
Charlotte?
Angus? Like,
yeah.
I
even ate at a steakhouse in Texas, like a kind of big, fancy steakhouse, and they had no idea what kind of cow the steak came from. They had no idea whatsoever, and they're like the big. It was an expensive steak, and they had no idea, let alone from the grocery store.
so I'll say this too. Like, I come from like an agriculture family. Like, I come from a family of like cattle ranchers and pig farmers and all these things. Like, so I I see it from both sides. But I think, when you talk about the zoophagy perspective of being able, despite it being a roast on a plate, you can then say, oh, well, that roast, was given to me by my friend Adam. And Adam went to British Columbia and shot this beautiful, epic bull moose on this great trip. And this is, a portion of the top round off of that. And like, that's like, even though I wasn't there and I didn't use my knife to cut the top round off that bull moose, like Adam did. And I know that, and I can sit there and I can connect it back. And I think that, given our modern food system, that will not exist when you go to the grocery store. I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier, and I was like, I go to like Trader Joe's or go to Whole Foods or whatever to get my like kind of base ingredients. And my goal there is to be as quickly as possible, right? I get through my list so I can get in and out, so I can avoid all the people, and I just throw stuff in there. None of my food has an identity except for what I choose. And it's only when I stop and I take out time and I'm like, I want to make sure, it's in season. I want things that are tied to that. There's some like basic guidelines to start. But when I go down to the freezer and I pick food out of my freezer that I've harvested, or I go to my fridge, or a friend gives me like a bottle of papaya liqueur that he made, like that to me ties in, and it just, that is so much more real.
Mm-hmm. The food
right,
has a story.
It presents like a zoophagy, like a zoo. It's almost hard to say it. Zoophagic imagination. If we're like getting like super nerdy, but like which I love to do, but like we create like the scene in our mind of like Adam killing that moose in British Columbia. We create that scene in our mind of like talking about, a mountain lion in Arizona. We talk about, a wolf, like Randy tells the whole story of killing that wolf on a whitetail hunt. And it was a lone female wolf, and she was mature and somehow by herself, and it's a good shot. And I think we do a real service to like the meat on our plate that way. I also want you to know that I live in a rural community where a lot of people raise their own meat, and so I'm planning on hopefully raising meat chickens here at some point. But I know a lot of ranchers, and I know a lot of people that deeply, deeply care about the animals that they're raising, and like my family makes it a point to buy beef direct from ranches. So like we do get to know like the breed of the cattle that we're eating, and we do get to engage with like people directly. And so like I would say that I wish that more people would do that. And I would say that like, and I would bet that you guys would agree that I would say we're living in a more enlightened food era than it certainly was when I was a kid, where like people are actually more interested in going to the farmer's market or knowing where food comes from and more curious about it. And so I think, I think hunting can be really missing from that conversation. And, but I'm also grateful to have worked, on Meat Eater and for multiple organizations that have created better stories around that. And that's really my intention with the Western, is like, how do we make hunting the adventure story that also goes next to skiing without like offending people? Do you know what I mean? Or like, like how do we sort of create like the gateway stories that like let people in on hunting? And but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about eating a mountain lion or eating a wolf. I think that actually does us a big service, because at the end of the day, the reason that people support hunting a lot of times when you ask is because people are eating the meat. And so when they start talking about trophy hunting, when they start talking about predator hunting, there's also a hidden assumption in there that those animals are not being eaten.
Yeah.
And so like, it's really interesting when you talk to people and you're like, well, wanton weights laws exist, right? Like we are in Montana, I'm required to, even if I kill a bear, I'm required to take the meat, the tenderloins, and the backstrap. Meat as in being the forequarters out of the field. So that sparks another conversation. So you eat bear. Like, yeah. And actually it's delicious. It's one of the best meals I've ever had. Like, so I think that I think that when we're talking about how to help the public better engage with hunters, another thing that we need to think about is how are we educating the public on what we're doing? Like, there is no trophy hunting in the US where you can cut the head off of any elk and walk out without the meat and have it not be poaching. Like, that is not a real thing, you know? And I know I'm speaking to the US to some Canadians, but like, I would also say that there's an aspect of what we do that we almost take for granted and we think that people know and they don't. And so I like, even in like the debate of hunting grizzly bears, I'm like, let's create wanton waste laws around grizzly bears. Let's make sure that when people are killing a grizzly bear, they're required to take it out of the field. And I think that that actually is something that can help people better understand like what's edible, which is, you know, almost anything that we're killing. Mm-hmm. So I you know, I wouldn't hesitate. I've actually eaten grizzly bear at BHA Rendezvous through their wild. One of the Alaskan guys brought grizzly bear there a couple years ago and it tasted just like red meat. So a lot of the myths around what's edible and inedible are also not true, right? So we have a lot of things to push against. It's fun. Like it should be fun anyway.
I have so many thoughts about.
Tell me, Justin, what are you thinking?
I sort of like. I think that honestly, in this is a perspective that's not uniquely my own. So I'll say that too. Is that I think a good portion of the future of conservation can be well balanced in a food approach. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that from someone who lives in the food world, but like I saw it sort of written when we had the challenge, not we, because I wasn't there anymore, but we were involved in sort of the support of it. But when the mountain lion debate came up in Colorado about hunting mountain lions and bobcats, and it was presented like it's not a trophy. Like there are people consuming this. And I think that's the story that needs to be told about a lot of things, ranging from, like you mentioned, grizzly bears, but to also too, like public land protections. Like not only is this a great place for me to recreate, but I depend on this piece of public land to feed my family.
Yeah.
And I think those words and those sayings are met more easily. People hear them easily than if you say like, oh, I like to just go out and hunt and fish. If it's like, I go out in pursuit of food for my family for the year. Mm-hmm. Like no one's going to be like, wait. Like, or well, I won't say no one. Few people, backtrack. Sure. Few people will be like, no, you are not going to feed your family. Like, no, you can't go there and do that. And
yeah,
I think through telling the whole story, just as you mentioned, like it's not sarcophagic. I guess I'll make up phrases. It's not sarcophagic just to pack it in.
Sarcophagic? Yeah.
I don't know.
We're taking it into new territory.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you.
To pack it inside a box, like spread the whole story out, show the emotion, that's like I got wrapped up in sort of this storytelling phase on social media, not me, but like in seeing it of like, success is the only story people want to see. And I think that's true and that's not true in many cases. People are interested in success and it gives like that yeehaw, yeah moment. But I think failure tells a story, but also like the deep lessons learned from the experience itself often kind of get missed. Mm-hmm. You spend 4 days in Wyoming chasing mule deer, and on the last day, the last hour, the last minute, you connect with one. But there's so many stories, there's so many lessons, there's so many emotions that go in every day, every minute, and I think that's like those need to be told as well, because I think it connects to where people become more receptive to hear the whole story and the emotional commitment and sort of perspective that I think hunters and anglers provide.
I agree. I think with that, especially, hunters are notoriously bad at context, which is hilarious to me because hunters are also like some of the best storytellers I've ever listened to. It's paradoxical, but I think it's hard to get context from a single picture. Do you know what I mean? Like you can provide all you want in the text. Like social media is not necessarily built for the long form. I think that's what's been interesting about being on Substack and trying to create something in a space that isn't necessarily rewarding via algorithm. It's rewarding via engagement, you know, which is like kind of the original social media that we all lived in back in 2015, right? So I think I guess I don't want to shortchange people. I think telling that story of the success is going to be the thing that people see the most because of the algorithm and how it plays out. I also think that the algorithm likes to hide a lot of stories about meat at this point. And there's so much like there's so much influence at the top of social media that's anti-meat and anti-food in a way. Like even just putting a butchered piece of meat up that has like no I don't know, zoophagic resemblance, right? Like it gets shut down. That's like a whole rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to go down, but here's what I'll say about that. I think that if you have the opportunity to cook for someone, if you have the opportunity to tell a story about a piece of meat, if you have the opportunity to even just explain to someone like what a wanton waste lot is, like once in a while, like you're doing something good on the behalf of the hunting community. And I know that you guys talk a lot about venison diplomacy. I mean, I think that like I was a recipient of that from the time I was a small child. And that was why I never really had any, I didn't have negative emotions around hunting. Do you know what I mean? Like for the first 30 years, I didn't shoot a gun until I was 30. But for the first 30 years of my life, I was like, oh yeah, no, I ate venison as a kid. Like I've had elk in Colorado, and I had friends that were big duck hunters in college, and like we'd go over to their house and they'd make, you know, dinner. So I think that like it's through food that you sort of create the ease of the conversation to you know, and I think we're all onto something with venison diplomacy. And I think that like the more we can extend it, the better. I will say that like beast feasts are so much fun. And I have gotten to try so many different animals, like at like wild game potlucks in Montana and at BHA Rendezvous. There's always just like an incredible, and I write about, you know, Bart George sharing his mountain lion with me at BHA Rendezvous. Like that's kind of how the piece ends up closing out, right? And that was such an interesting story.
I was fortunate enough to judge the wild game cook-off last year at
fun
at BHA, and then sort of like each year before that, one of my favorite moments is going behind the judges and like tasting the foods. Because I love that event. To me is really exciting because you get people who are very proud to represent their state, which doesn't always come through these days unless you're a big college football fan, I feel like. But they're proud to represent their state. There's a narrative behind everything, right? The people who can tell the story about the food are usually the people that win it. They can also cook really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think the cooler, it's like there's a little bit of a shock and awe too of like, hey, what cool ingredient can I find? But also like, how are you shaping the dish to tell the story, to represent where you're from, to like also celebrate all these wild ingredients. And I think that sums up where my love for food is.
It's just fun. Like, I love having fun with food. I think like even just getting to the point where you're willing to try wolf, like there are a lot of hunters that are like, they freak out when I tell them that I've eaten wolf. Like it's really kind of hilarious. It's like, you will try like, I mean, but a lot of hunters haven't even tried like the heart of their deer. You know what I mean? So like, I also understand that there's like there are like norms and like, you know, we press up against a lot of cultural norms within hunting. So like, how many people have not tried liver or kidney or caul fat or like saved those parts of the deer that might be less appetizing, or even like, I freaked out at one of my friends because they grind all of their shoulder. And I was like, what are you doing? Stop doing that. I'm like, just like braising is so easy. Like brown the meat, throw it in there with, I was like, I'll give you a recipe. Like my friend got a beautiful bull elk and she grounds all the shoulders. And I was like, sis, like we have to have a conversation. Like I need to like
single cheer.
Like, you know what I mean? So I and I'm not saying that that's like a terrible thing, but I never end up with a lot of grind just because I like really enjoy braises. And I think that like more people would take more from the animal if they knew how good it tasted. Like I save up my tongues and do tacos de lengua like that. When I travel to Mexico, that's like all I eat. You know what I mean? So I think that you find, and I will say that there's a point in my life where all of that would have been ick to me, right? Like, so I understand it, but I also think that like the more adventures that we have on the plate, like the more we're opened up to a different way of seeing the world. And that's really what that piece is about. It's about looking at the world and trying to press up against things that like they might feel like cultural norms, they might feel right, but really I do think that it's wrong that all these horses that I've loved have ended up in a place where they didn't nurture the environment. I think it's sad. It's a huge waste of nutrients. Like we have millions of horses in the US. And because we're so closed off due to cultural taboos, you know, they end up in landfills. And I just, I don't know that that is the right place for them to end up. Does it mean that I'm going to eat my own horses? Like, I don't know. Like maybe one day I will. I've heard of a couple people in the West that do, but I have deep relationships with them. And, you know, I train my own horses. I have like a Mustang here that I'm training. Like she's 3 years old. Like she's going to be my badass mountain mare. Like, I've trained another horse that's being leased out to kids to show. And, you know, it's one of those things that it's just like, we put so much time and energy into something. And at the end of the day, like this body, this 1,000 to 1,200 pounds is just put into the ground. And I'm starting to have a problem with it. I really am. And so I don't know what that looks like in the long term for me, but it freaks me out a little. I'll tell you that. It's very weird. It's a very weird road to go down. It will definitely freak out a lot of my friends if I like do decide to do something different. So I don't know. But I also feel like there's an ethic and an integrity, right? Like that we have as hunters, and it's like, it's about understanding like the greater picture. And so like, if I can press up against that and make that a little bit uncomfortable, but to the point where like you're just asking questions and being curious, then I've done my job as a writer.
Yeah. I think that it's funny that you mentioned that, and it popped in my head at the same exact time. It was like in graduate school, they're like, you know, the point of academic writing is not, you're not going to solve any problems. Like that's not your job, is to be the problem solver, be all end all. Your job is to write something that makes people think and want them to do more or think more or be inspired to take the next step. And I think that really, that hits it there. And that uncomfortableness, I think a little bit of it is going to push norms and change norms and reshape. Like if we all do the same thing and write the same thing and take the pictures of the same thing, it's only ever going to be the same. But it's like those little changes that are going to be those moments of inspiration where somebody's going to step out of the box and somebody's going to find something different. And, you know, their little individualistic flair or perspective or experience is going to drive change that will snowball, you know, and create, if not a sub community, or change the entire outdoor community. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've solved all the problems here.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. This is it. But we have so where can folks, now that we've inspired everybody to give their perspective, where can people give their perspective at? Yeah, be curious, share your thoughts. If people want to receive, contribute, do whatever to the Western, where does all that take place?
So thewestern.com, it's spelled THEWESTRN. So there's no E. Like it's sort of like The Kitchen, if you've ever used that blog. But thewestern.com, you can find us there. So technically, like we're a Substack, but if you subscribe to us annually, which is $50 a year, you get all 4 print copies of the outdoor paper that we're creating as well. And if you want to buy the paper individually, actually the Incredible Edible Animal Hierarchy is going to be in the paper for this round, in addition to a couple other long reads, and a wide swath of contributors writing for us. So that's going to be a 32-page paper. We're selling that for $10 a piece via our store. So it's pretty easy to find the store through thewestern.com. You can also ask me questions on Instagram. If you put in NKQ, I should come up. NK Qualtieri is my Instagram handle. But we're super excited about the paper. If you're a writer, we're accepting pitches for summer. We pay market rates. And yeah, we're really happy to be able to do that for people. We also offer like a little bit of advertising. So if people want to do, I call it community-minded advertising, like if they want to offer a discount or do something special with our readers, that would also extend to other publications. We want to be a cooperative community, not a competitive community. So yeah, that's kind of like the long hook of everything, but it's been really exciting so far, and it seems like people are really liking the work, and we hope that it becomes like more community minded as we go forward, and that we're just able to really latch on to what we call like the backcountry of outdoor media, which is like the sense of being connected to actual people through wild places and stories, and doing it in a way that's slower than social media. So yeah, join us. I think it's going to be fun. The paper is going to have, a bunch of my friends' kids have sent in paintings and pictures. And so there is a really communal aspect where like people can also contribute in their own way. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be sort of like your local paper meeting like the outdoor community.
It's awesome. It sounds rad.
It's going to be fun. We're like in design right now, and it's really cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. Adam, do you have any last thoughts?
Just on eating horse, just a quick thought. Horses, it's allowed to be sold in Canada. So I grew up as amongst a Dutch family eating horse a little bit. But in Ottawa, which is Canada's national city, there's on one side it's English, the other side is French. So it's the border river separating Quebec and in Ontario. And on one side, the Ontario side, people don't really eat horses. And on the other side, which you could literally throw a stone at, you go to the grocery store, just your regular grocery store, and there's horse meat in between the pork and the beef. And they're not, I have friends on both sides. We're not all that different. We go to the same bars. We eat the same food. Generally, we do the same things. And it just goes to show when people are alarmed that, the eating something so different. How could you possibly eat a horse? Like those people right there, living right beside me are. So take a step back. Take a step back because you're not the center of the universe, and there's lots of other cultures and lots of other ways of looking at things. And yeah, try it out. It's good. It's good tasting meat.
I'll just add something onto that really quickly. I think that's really important to point out that with eating horse, a lot of it comes from our cultural taboos around like wealth and inequality and what wealthy people eat versus what impoverished people eat. And that was really like how horses ended up off the menu here in this country. So in the US, so many people came over, from the old world. And in the old world, like eating horse was a sign of poverty. So that's where beef ends up taking like a really strong place in the narrative. When beef becomes cheap, beef was sort of the food of the wealthy. And so beef was actually, having beef in your freezer was a sign of upward mobility. So if you had horse or offal or, heads or strange parts in your freezer, that was all sign of like the poverty mentality, which actually was a lot more holistic around eating. Right. And like, if you're like us and you're foodies, you also know that some of the best food comes out of those places, like tacos to lingua. So I will also caution people that like a lot of our taboos are not about taste, and they're not about what's delicious, and they're not about what's nutritious. They're about people really trying to keep up with the Joneses, and that like their meat was a huge reflection of that, especially when they were having company over. So just something to chew on.
Food for thought, as they say.
Some horse meat to chew on.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming on. Like I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first started chatting about it. And it's interesting to just sort of like, it's going to take me a day or two to just digest a lot of what we talked about. But it's good though. I think it's, it represents everything well, and I'm excited. And I hope everybody enjoys listening to it. If they don't, whatever.
So I hope I wasn't a little, I'm definitely ADHD, so I'm a little all over the place, but
no,
I think that that's like what helps make us writers. And I'm equally excited to, continue learning from you guys and like how to become a better wild game cook. So thank you for what you do. And I'm just appreciative of being here. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll say this, everybody out there listening, we'll include the links in all the show notes. Make sure that you head over to social media, follow Harvesting Nature, follow The Western, follow Nicole, follow everybody, get some good information, subscribe to their Substack so you get that cool outdoor paper coming in quarterly. And then lastly, after you've done all those things, and if you're not too exhausted, whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now, punch that 5-star button, leave us a review, tell us we're doing right, or, tell us we're doing wrong. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.